And it's now my pleasure to introduce Dr. Gisela Boeck. Gisela Boeck is a senior scientist at the Chemistry Institute of the University of Rostock in Germany, and she's the chair of the working group History of Chemistry of the Gesellschaft Deutscher Chemiker. She's highly active in different areas related to the study and history of chemistry, and she will now introduce us to some of these first women who were active in chemistry research. So the floor is yours, Gisela. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for the nice, kind introduction. And yes, now we want to speak about some female chemists who are connected with the University of Zurich. This impressive statement you have seen in the title can be found in Wilhelm White's review of Lydia Sesemann's dissertation. Lydia Sesemann, who is that? Many will ask. Yes, she has been forgotten more or less, even though she was the first woman worldwide to be awarded a Dr. Phil degree with a thesis on chemistry. I'm very pleased that there will now be a memorial to her and other female chemists who received their doctorates before the move to the new university chemistry building. We have already heard that many women enrolled at the University of Zurich. Some of them stayed only a half year, some of them stayed longer and wrote a dissertation. And in this table and in the following table, you see the names of these first female chemists from the University of Zurich. You see that we had to overcome some problems because they were enrolled at the university, they were enrolled at the ETH, some of them at both ETH and university, and one of them, Gertruda von Marseven, wasn't enrolled nor at university nor at ETH. We have another problem. In all the documents, you find the Heimatort. What is Heimatort? Is this the town where the woman is born? Or is this something like here in your Swiss Heimatort? It's difficult to say what it means. And that's why it's also difficult to say, are they Germans, are they Russians, and so on. And so we had some problems. But in the case of Lydia Sesemann, it was not so difficult. Lydia, or a bit difficult is it too. Lydia Maria Sesemann comes from Viborg. There she is born in 1845, and she is baptized, I want to mention it, in a German parish a bit later. At that time, Viborg belonged to the Russian Empire, and after World War I, it became part of independent Finland. Later, the Soviet Union occupied most of Karelia, including Viborg, and so Viborg is still a part of Russia. Lydia Sesemann's family had German ancestors. After the early death of Lydia's father, her mother moved with her two daughters to Stuttgart. And Lydia writes in her CV, after completing all classes and receiving her leaving certificate, she went on a longer stay in Germany, where she continued to prepare herself for academic studies through private tuition, namely in mathematics and Latin, to prepare for academic study, for which she went to Zurich in 1869 and enrolled at the Faculty of Philosophy and made the natural sciences, mainly chemistry, the subject of her studies. Lydia Sesemann pursued her studies with determination. Strictly speaking, Lydia Sesemann was also subject of the Tsar's decree of June 4, 1873, which prohibited all Russian women from studying in Zurich. However, Lydia remained in Zurich, and it can be assumed that Lydia had no intention of returning to the Russian Empire. It would be interesting to learn a bit about the personality of Lydia. And I found a report of Franziska Tiburtius. She also studied here in Zurich, but medicine, and she is born on the island Rügen. This is very near to Rostock. And she writes in her memories about Lydia that she was a clever Finnish woman, that she didn't like to speak Russian, that she was blonde, a bit stiff, very educated, but likes to laugh. And then she also explains what the company could eat at this evening, and you see here also the guests of this evening. When Lydia Sesemann came to Zurich in 1869, Johannes Wislicenus was working here at the Chemistry Institute of the university. In 1871, Victor Merz, who had already been an associate professor here, became his successor. And Merz worked together with Wilhelm White. And for a long time, the chemistry department used its rooms in this building, in the cantonal school, and the laboratory was mainly named University Laboratory number 2, and you see here a very old picture of this university laboratory. It's a pity it's a time before Lydia Sesemann came here, because you can see here also Karl Löwig, and Karl Löwig left Zurich already in 1853. So we have also only an impression of this laboratory, and I would say in that time it was really a modern laboratory. Lydia Sesemann dealt with problems of benzyl and dibenzyl acetic acid, and already in July 1873 she was able to publish an article on her findings as sole author in Berichte der Deutschen Chemischen Gesellschaft. And in 1874, her work on the right side was published, and she used this publication for her dissertation, like you can see her in her request to award the degree of a Doctor of Philosophy. She especially mentioned this book. And all reviews were very good, as we heard already, and the doctorate was conferred in absentia on May 15th in 1874. But what became with Lydia Sesemann? She had already been exmatriculated from the university in April 1874. A reference to a stay in Leipzig can be found in the reports of the Deutsche Chemische Gesellschaft. Two assistants of the physico-chemical laboratory in Leipzig proposed her as a member of this society. And so she became the second female member of the German Chemical Society. It can be assumed that Lydia Sesemann stayed in Leipzig for several years and maybe worked in Gustav Wiedemann's laboratory, but no traces can be found in the archives of the university in Leipzig. Later, she stayed in several towns. This can we see from also from the Berichte of Deutsche Chemische Gesellschaft. There you can find a list of all members, but no information what she did do. Did she teach something? We only know that Lydia Sesemann translated a paper of Guido Pellizzari, who worked in Florence, but also in the University of Florence, no traces. It can be that she worked as a teacher in Lausanne, but it cannot be proven beyond doubt. Later, she moved to Munich to her mother, and she died there in 1925. I also was interested in the fact, was there a connection to women's rights or women's education struggle. All we know at present is that she was friends with the doctor, women's rights activist, and peace campaigner Hope Bridges Adams Lehman. You see her, as can be gleaned from a letter written by her to an artist and women's rights activist, Ida Demel. You see this letter here on the right side, and a letter to Lydia, and especially in this letter to Ida, Hope Bridges mentioned her old friend, Fräulein Dr. Chemie Lydia Sesemann, but more I don't know, sorry. Later, both women, Hope Bridges and Lydia Sesemann, as I already told you, lived in Munich. Only fragments of the life of Marie Stamo are known. She came from the Ginkonci estate near Chisinau. This is now Chisinau in Moldova. Her father was a landowner there, and she was first educated at home and later at a boarding school in Dresden, and then came to Zurich. And this fact that she was in Dresden gives me a hint that she can be also a German one, because many Germans came to this region of Chisinau, Bessarabia in that time, because Katharina II called Germans to help in the development of this region. But I could not find any birth certificate or something like that. And she enrolled at the university and later at the Polytechnic. And you can also see her dissertation here. It's a more physical-chemical theme she worked on. But more I do not know, but we will still working on that problem. Much better known is the life story of Rachel Lloyd. She was born in 1839 and was enrolled at the university here in Zurich at the age of 46 and received her doctorate at 48. She came from a Quaker family in eastern Ohio. In 1859, she married Franklin Lloyd, who had a chemistry laboratory in his home. But after the death of his husband and her children, she traveled through Europe, and when she came back to the US, she taught chemistry at several schools. And remarkably, she incorporated laboratory experiments into the curriculum. In 1875, she enrolled in Harvard University Summer School. A real enrollment at university was forbidden. And she worked on quantitative chemical problems together with Charles Maybury, the director of this program, and published with him. But she wanted to become a professor of chemistry at the newly founded Bryan Moore College, a women's college. And this college rejected her application, despite of her great experience in teaching and a positive recommendation. She did not have a university degree. And so she decided to go to Zurich and studied here with Victor Merz and completed her studies and became a doctor of the University of Zurich. And she was, as far as we know, the first American woman to receive a doctorate in chemistry. Shortly after graduating in Zurich, she went back to Lincoln, Nebraska, and became an associate and later a full professor. And the same time, she was an assistant chemist at the Nebraska Agriculture Experiment Station. Her research focused on the chemical analysis of sugar concentration in sugar beets, but health problems forced her to stop working, and she died already in the age of 61. And here you see the words of the chancellor, which he said about Rachel Lloyd after her death. And you also see the old chemistry building at the University of Nebraska. And it's interesting that this building is a historical landmark of the ACS already some years. More problems we have with the life story of Olga Wohlbrück. We already mentioned this name. Also in the archives here at the university and in the ETH, there is no CV. And this is a problem. That's why I cannot really say what's, if she is a German or not. She lists Weimar in Saxony as her place of origin, Heimatort or not. She studied at the Polytechnic and earned a degree in chemistry there, and her dissertation was inspired by Arthur Hunt and reviewed by Merz and Harutyun Abelyans. And Merz wrote, "The dissertation submitted by Ms. Wohlbrück appears to represent a study conducted with diligence, perseverance, and expertise, which has yielded results of general interest and can undoubtedly be described as sufficient." Natalie Polonowski studied at the Polytechnic, but of course also received her doctorate from the University of Zurich, because it was not allowed at the Polytechnic to become a doctor. She wrote her dissertation under Heinrich Goldschmidt, and she comes from a town in Novogrudok. This information I could found, but her dissertation states that she comes from Pruzhany, and in the review it's written down that she comes from Moscow. But I know, and this is, I could found in the CV that she attended the 5th Moscow Girls' Gymnasium and married already in Russia in 1884 Max Polonowski or Morduk Hirsch Polonowski. Maybe it was necessary to come out of Russia, that she must be married. This is unclear, but it's interesting that there is a chemist, Polonowski. Maybe you had heard already about the Polonowski reaction. And I think this was her husband, and she later lived together here near in Mulhouse. Much better known is again Gertruda van Marsewijn. Sorry, I do not know if this is the right pronunciation of her name. She was born in Amsterdam and was graduated from the Höhere Bürgerschule in Amsterdam. And already as a young girl, she gave various lectures on food safety. And in her CV, she states that she studied at the University of Amsterdam, but according to the historian of chemistry Ernst Homburg, she was never enrolled there. In her CV, she points out also that she worked together with Professor Van 't Hoff, and indeed, Georg Bredig, he was in that time also in the laboratory of Van 't Hoff, remembers her. You see, Gertruda was a graceful, quiet student. I do not know if she was really quiet because she had hard to work. And there exists also a picture from that time, Amsterdam. And here you can see Gertruda. And it's really a problem to find photos of this early woman. And she worked already in Amsterdam on her dissertation. In that time, Heinrich Goldschmidt, who was he was an honorary professor at the University of Zurich. He was also in Amsterdam, and maybe he played a decisive role in that time that he came to Zurich. And Werner was also interested in such problems on which Gertruda worked on. You see there the title of her dissertation. But she was also not enrolled here in Zurich, nor at the university, nor at ETH. Later in the Netherlands, she married also a chemist. She gave lectures. She wrote papers for the newspaper about the field of food safety, and they together also established a laboratory together. So let's come to Marie Baum. And at first I heard the name Marie Baum. Yes, she was a women's rights activist. Why chemistry? Yes, she was really a chemist, but this is not known very well. She comes from Danzig, and she passed Matura here in Zurich and went to ETH to study chemistry. In 1870, she graduated with a degree at the ETH, and Eugen Bamberger then submitted a request to hire her as a first assistant at the chemical analysis laboratory. Despite considerable resistance, he succeeded. She had to supervise around 60 students, men, in the laboratory hall. After completing her doctorate, she worked briefly as a chemist in Agfa's patent department in Berlin, but then turned to social work. Edith Allen Humphrey, I think she is well or better known here in Zurich than in Germany. She studied at first chemistry in London and then applied here in university to do her doctorate, and she came in the group of Alfred Werner students, and it is told that she worked in the inadequate basements known as the catacombs. Humphrey did receive a scholarship, but it was not enough to live on in the very expensive Switzerland already in that time. Werner recognized Humphrey's abilities and hired her as an assistant. You can see it here in her CV. Humphrey was the first of the students of Werner to successfully synthesize Werner's first new series of synth-trans isomeric cobalt complexes as a class of compounds that was crucial in the development and proof of his coordination theory. It's interesting that Humphrey was recommended to transfer to the University of Leipzig to continue her research under Wilhelm Oswald. She later reported, "But they wouldn't have me in Germany. They said I could go to lectures, but not to practicals, because the men wouldn't do any work." Maybe this was also a problem for Lydia Sesemann. So she returned to England and became a development chemist. In 1904, Humphrey was one of 19 female chemists who demanded that the Chemical Society admit women as members. This was finally granted in 1919, and Humphrey was subsequently elected as a member. The crystals synthesized by Humphrey have stood the test of time and can now be viewed at the Royal Society of Chemistry of London. Also worth mentioning are the Swiss Hedwig Kleiner. Maybe we discuss the problem still if she is a chemist or a physicist. The Russian Marie Pokrovsky, the Germans Anna Dorn and Dora Stern, Cornelia Geisler from Galicia, and the Dutch Barta Jacoba Karsten. But we have no time for that, and I want only to finish with Dora Stern, because we have a picture, better to say a painting of her. Dora Stern was born in Bern in 1889, and her father was a well-known German Jewish historian, Alfred Stern. She was trained here in Zurich at a private school and later in the teacher training college. And after graduating from high school, she studied 4 semesters in Zurich and 1 semester in Berlin. The family was friends with Albert Einstein. After completing her doctorate, Dora Stern worked on the continuation of Beilstein's handbook. And her colleague, Edith Josefi, was only able to remain on the editorial staff until 1933, while Dora Stern stayed until 1937. As Jews, they were dismissed. Josefi and Stern attempted to launch a competing project at Elsevier in Amsterdam, but in 1939, Dora Stern decided to emigrate to the United States, where she died in poverty in 1971. As the yearbooks and the directory of doctors reveal, many women whose life stories would be worth examining in more detail also received doctorates in the following years. Today, however, we have focused on the first female chemists. They came from different countries and show the international character of the students in Zurich. They had to overcome many hurdles, but they succeeded in gaining admission to a university and obtaining their doctoral degrees. Only some of them were able to continue working in chemistry. Most of these women have been forgotten, which makes it all the more remarkable that they have now been rescued from oblivion and that their sometimes very impressive CVs can serve as role models today. Thank you for your attention.